Welcome to the Maintenance Community Podcast, a podcast for people who want to learn all things about maintenance and reliability. I'm your host, Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of UpKeep. Each week, I'll be meeting with an expert within the maintenance community to take a deep dive into topics that help educate and elevate our entire industry. Our topics are sourced from the Maintenance Community Slack group, which is the largest online community of maintenance professionals all around the world. And today, I'm super excited to have one of our very own, Gary Wood, here on the show with us. Gary is actually a senior implementation manager here at UpKeep, but before working in the tech space, Gary garnered over 20 years of experience in maintenance. The team here at UpKeep is extremely lucky to have an expert like you, Gary, here on this team. And I'm really excited to also welcome you to this podcast and really excited to learn from you.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here. Thrilled to be an UpKeeper.
And as I was mentioning right before we hit record on the podcast, you open every single day within our internal Slack group saying, "Good morning, UpKeepers. I love your positivity and welcoming every single day to the UpKeep team. I'm super excited to have you."
Thank you.
The way that we always kick the show off, Gary, is having you introduce a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you were first introduced to this wonderful field of maintenance and reliability.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, Ryan, I do have 20 plus years of maintenance experience in manufacturing, working for some of the smallest organizations in the country to some of the larger corporate organizations that fulfill our needs on a daily basis. And, I've been fortunate enough and honored enough to work for some really world-class organizations. My dad, worked for one of those organizations, Goodyear, for many years. And, he turned wrenches and whatnot. But I remember when I was younger, we'd go into his shop and he'd be working on a lawnmower motor or a car motor or something. And he started educating me on things, son, you got to learn your sizes, with your wrenches and stuff like that. And I think that's when I really fell in love with turning wrenches and maintenance, When I finished my years in the military in 1989, I started my manufacturing career. I started at a small town denim factory in Irwin, North Carolina that made blue jeans for Lee's and Levi Strauss. And I eventually left there and ended up at Goodyear with my dad. After he retired, I left and went on to some more organizations. But in each step of the way, each plant has its own structure on how they want their maintenance department to function, or different CMMSs, different processes and things like that. And I had to change my style to kind of sort of match that. And then, try to see some room for improvement along the way, look for some root cause or process improvement, so to speak. I was fortunate enough to learn a lot of things. And I was just fortunate to be handed down the maintenance wrench from my dad, if you would. So I'm blessed in that aspect.
That's awesome. I mean, it sounds like you had such a unique experience first getting into maintenance, learning the tools of the trade through your dad, and then sticking around this industry for the past 20 plus years. Now this next chapter in your career is getting into tech. And Gary, we're so excited to have you as part of this team because the industry experience you have out in the field, and now also on the tech side too. You've seen a lot of different CMMS implementations, the good, the bad, the ugly, the great. The question here, I think for me to you, for all of our listeners, is really centered around when is it the right time for organizations to look into CMMS, knowing that you've had all this industry experience, field experience, you've seen the good, you've seen some bad. When is it the right time to implement software?
In my professional experience, to be honest, it would be yesterday. When a company is getting their buildings, they're laying the foundation, they're getting a location picked and all that, and they're starting to build their building. When you start bringing assets in and you start bolting them down to the floors and you start running production numbers, you need to have a CMMS system, okay? A lot of people, they get flustered by the cost of CMMS systems. Yes, there's a cost involved, but the savings far outweigh the cost, the initial cost. You mentioned the good, bad, the ugly. I was in one organization where their parts room, not to be blunt, but it looked like Fred Sanford's garage. I mean, it was just everything thrown in a pile. And I got in there and I had that thing I mean, it looked like Walmart when I was finished. Everything was labeled, have a spot on the shelf. And they were just wasting so much money in the parts. They had 10s and 20s and 30s of things that they only needed 5 of. So it can help you in saving parts. It can track your inventory. It can help you with labor. CMMS program, if it's robust enough, if you're having a lot of labor costs and a majority of that is overtime, that should tell you you probably need to hire another maintenance tech, cut you overtime, and stay within the main frame of your labor.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because at my old plant too, I feel like we had a very similar experience to software too. For some reason, it was okay to spend money in parts and put it into our spare room, and then kind of like lose track of it. And these are like $1,000 parts. These are not like cheap parts. But for some reason, it was okay to purchase these parts and not really track it, manage it. But it was always much more difficult to purchase, software and technology for whatever reason. And I think it's just this like shift that the entire industry is going from, which is, very physical world to a combined morphed digital and physical world. And I think to your point, like there are savings across the board once you realize, you could save money in parts, time, cost. You could save, reduce downtime as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have a good PM program in place, you're going to reduce your downtime. I've been in another one of those ugly organizations, believe it or not, right here in the Research Triangle Park, one of the industrialized places in the nation. And they couldn't keep machines running. I think it was like a 43% efficiency rating when I got there. And the only thing I changed was implement a PM program. I physically had to show the techs how to do a PM. After that, their efficiency rating went to like 96, 97, if I'm not mistaken. So, just that can help save money. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So Gary, you've made this big shift from working out in the field to now on the technology side. I'm sure you've gotten these like, great perspectives on both sides now around implementation. And for the record here, for all of our listeners, Gary is a senior implementation manager. So you basically deal with all the most complex implementations for our customers today, and sometimes the most difficult ones as well. So again, kind of stringing from all of your experience, all of your background, Gary, what can teams do to plan for a great implementation?
To have that implementation to move forward, after you're done with your project, step with me is establishing team buy-in. Let the team in the door on deciding this thing. Maintenance teams, we're a very tight group. I mean, we kind of like to separate ourselves from the production guys. We're very tight, very, very hard to penetrate that family, right? So when upper management just throws a CMMS at them and they don't let them, in on the process of finding something that they think they could use or relate in their work environment, they take offense to that. They look at it as somebody trying to micromanage them, so to speak, or micromanage their time. You get that buy-in from your maintenance techs and you have your data prepared and all that, you're going to have a great implementation, no doubt.
Do you have any like tips, advice, recommendations on how to best get the buy-in? You mentioned like involving them in the process of selection. Any like tips, advice around additional ways to get that group buy-in at the start and also through implementation?
It's just being humble and just asking the guys, hey, what do you think about this system? Come here, I want to show you something. That's how I done it.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to humble yourself. You're not greater than thou. Humble yourself. Go to your maintenance tech. Hey, you ever worked CMMS? Come here. I want to show you. Let's look at this. I got a demo in here. I just want you to look at it and see what you think. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, once you get on that level, with the maintenance tech, and if you have a good team, they're going to do that. They're going to come in and give you their opinion, whether it looks great or, you may want to look at something else. So it's basically just let them in the door. I mean, when you start shopping around, let them know you're shopping around, let them see the demos just like you, and just kind of move forward from there. Because I mean, once you establish that buy-in, the change management is going to be a piece of cake.
All right. So, obviously, again, Gary, you've got a ton of experience. You've seen a lot of great implementations. You've seen a lot of companies get great buy-in from the maintenance technicians. And as we've mentioned in the past, like they're the ones that are ultimately using the system. So obviously, if you get their buy-in, you're going to have great data to back up any of the decisions that you want to make.
Mhm.
Where do you see CMMS implementations fail? And obviously, none of the UpKeep implementations, right, Jerry?
Yeah, none of the upkeep implementations have failed, thank goodness. But yeah, I have seen some implementations fail. Even with a prior organization, doing an on-site, I've had a guy just get up and leave the meeting, an older maintenance tech. But you have to enforce. This is not a time management tool. This is absolutely an asset and cost management tool. That's all they're geared for. And once I relayed that to that gentleman that walked out, got him back in there, he still had some issues because he really wasn't tech savvy. But I had him lean on some of the younger guys that were. And before I left on Thursday of that week, he was good to go with the system. So establishing that buy-in's critical. Like I said from the get-go, maintenance team's a very tight family. Okay. They don't like surprises on them. If you come up to them beforehand, everything will work out fine.
Yeah.
But I have seen some fail due to that.
Yeah. I mean, that top down approach, I think when I think about implementation, there's kind of two phases of implementation. One is like the software, the technology, the IT implementation. And the
Mhm,
second one is implementation of people actually using the system. I
mhm.
think that top down approach works real well for the first one, which is making sure that like IT and the software stack is, integrated and supported. That it works really well. But, when you do that, like top down, everyone use this, the critical piece around like getting team buy-in from people actually using the system on a day-to-day basis, that's where the top down approach really is difficult for the team.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. I have some clients that do a train the trainer type scenario where, I may train the supervisors or the managers or whatnot, and they get down on a better level. One guy even said they had drinks and pizza during the training session. I mean, I think that's awesome. Okay. Call in some pizza, get a couple of Mountain Dews or Pepsis or whatever, and have a little training session, with just a maintenance team. And he reported back he got great buy-in from that. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I think the other really interesting thing about this like buy-in is obviously the drinks and the food. I think are great ways to get more people bought in. I think the second component of this is like the idea of elevating their role, right? Going from
Mhm.
just always out into the field, but now looking at like how data affects the decisions that they make within their business. I think that's a really, really cool aspect that you can't really do when everything is on paper and pen. The
Right.
reason why we're moving to a digital system is to get, actionable insights from the data that we collect, that we can aggregate, that we can report on from out in the field. And I think that's just a really cool shift in mentality that I think helps people do their job better.
Yep,
Uh,
exactly.
we talked about the software, or let's call it like the CMMS implementation, in two different functional areas. One like the software IT stack implementation. The second one is getting team buy-in. But maybe there's actually a third, which is getting people to continue using a CMS.
Yep.
And maybe I'd love to pick your brain, Gary, about now that, let's call it, we've integrated the solution, we've rolled it out on the IT side, we've gotten team buy-in. How do you keep the momentum up so that people continuously use a CMMS, so that you're continuously gathering new insights, new data, to make smarter decisions?
9 times out of 10, if you establish that team buy-in from the onset in the demo phase, okay, letting the maintenance team let their voice be heard, so to speak. Okay. Normally, if you get them in that phase, you'll get your data sets. At that point, they'll be excited about the system. Now, you may have a couple of stragglers, some of the older guys, some of the smarter guys in the industry, right, are not real tech savvy. Let them lean on these younger guys to show them, how to work the system, how to input the data, how to pull parts over, how to create multiple parts to it. So that's what I've always looked at to get people to continue working the system.
Yeah.
Let them have the keys to the kingdom, and request feedback. That's another thing. You got to get feedback from them. Hey, how do you like this system? And it's okay. Okay, what's the problem? Come here, let's talk about it. I've done that before. I've had to create workarounds or different solutions for CMMS systems that weren't too robust, and unfortunately, I've had the the luxury of working with I think it's 13 or 14 different CMMS programs thus far in my career. So
Wow.
that's a lot. I've seen pretty much all of it.
Awesome. So, one thing you mentioned, Gary, is you've worked with probably 13 or 14 different CMS
Yeah.
programs. You've been the end user of it. You've been the manager of it. You've been
Yep.
the implementer of it. And now you're on the, software UpKeep CMMS side. What's something that you wish more people knew about with regards to CMMS?
The biggest thing I look at is the cost savings. Maintenance is my passion. It always have been, like I said, from that young boy working on a lawnmower motor back in my dad's shop. Maintenance is my passion. I want other organizations to be better than the last ones I was in, to understand the cost savings from it, the asset management side of it. Believe it or not, the last plant I worked at prior to going into the software side of things had a piece of equipment that was built in 1943. And they were, having custom pistons made for it once every quarter that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Instead of doing that and having all the downtime associated to it and have all the parts associated, the labor hours and all that, just buy a new piece of equipment and it'll run like a Cadillac, not to mention the warranty aspects you're going to have of it. So you're going to have just more savings across the board. And where did you learn that? In your CMMS system.
If you're able to collect the right data and go through the implementation and continue using it and getting that buy-in from your team. Absolutely agree. Obviously a big supporter of that, Gary.
Yep.
All right. So again, you are an expert in this field, Gary. We're extremely excited to have you as part of this team. I know from personal experiences working with you, Gary, is that you are a true life learner. So maybe you could share with all of our listeners, where do you go for new ideas? Where do you go to continue learning more about this, field of maintenance and reliability?
So I am on LinkedIn, and as you know, LinkedIn has all these channels on there where you can go through and just learn things. I'm part of these groups like plant reliability and maintenance professionals or industrial manufacturing maintenance professionals. Also read our own Ricky Smith's articles and everything. So a big fan of Ricky Smith. Have been connected with him for, I think it's 9 or 10 years now. I'm not sure. I have to check on that. But we've been connected a while, but I always love reading his stuff, his data. Very smart gentleman. We're blessed to have him with UpKeep. And obviously, the UpKeep maintenance community. I read some things in there where people, some discussions that we have in here with people and some of their experiences. And I'm like, wow, okay, I've never thought of that. And I'll go back and I'll do research on it, and see how that works out. But yeah, just try to learn every day. That's my goal. Learn something new every day.
Awesome. I love the lifelong learner mentality. I definitely share that with you as well, Gary. Just to wrap things up, could you share with all of our listeners the different ways that they could follow you on your journey and connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, I am on LinkedIn, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can email me, gary.wood@onupkeep.com. And yeah, I'd connect with anybody. It's like I tell my fellow associates at UpKeep, I just had a great conversation with Max Gong yesterday, right? And we were talking about some new stuff, and you know where I'm going there. And I'm really excited for UpKeep. I got goosebumps. UpKeep is fixing to really be something special. And it's like I told him, anytime you want to talk to me and just get my past experiences or best practices or whatever, just carve out some time on my calendar and talk.
Gary, you're such a wealth of knowledge, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time to all of our listeners and anyone that wants to connect with you. Thank you again for joining me and joining us on this podcast. Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to today's episode of the Maintenance Community Podcast. Again, my name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of UpKeep, and you can also connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email directly at ryan@onupkeep.com. You can also find me and also Gary in the maintenance community Slack group. Feel free to ask us any questions, follow up with how you thought today's episode was, or suggest future topics. You can sign up at upkeep.org and find the maintenance community Slack group. I hope to connect with all of you soon. And until next time, thanks again, Gary.
All right. Glad to be here. Thank you.